Hello, you are watching The Rebel Nutritionist with me, Meryl Brandwine, and I'm the owner of the Brandwine Institute for Nutrition and Wellness, a holistic wellness center located in South Florida. I help my clients ditch diet fads and uncover the real truth about how food can truly heal your life. I know that together we can help you feel great. I'm excited to show you the way to long-term healthy living. So let's dive in and get started. All right, welcome back. And today we're going to take a deep dive into one of my favorite topics, gut health and the role of nutrition in chronic disease. So today on the show, I have invited Associate Professor Marie Vander Meer. I'm gonna mess that up, from the University of Memphis, to help us understand how diet and nutrient-driven changes in the gut microbiome impact chronic disease development. That's a mouthful. Welcome. And now, okay, so tell me how to pronounce your name properly so I don't butcher it.
So it's Marie Vander Merwe.
Oh, see, I totally messed that.
Yeah, so the W is like a V.
Got it. Okay, well, we are so excited to have you because I see so many patients in my practice who are so surprised by the connection between chronic health conditions and gut health. So we are going to take a dive in today and have you help us understand this. So first, tell us a little bit more about yourself, if you can, and how you got started in the area and why you think this is such an important area of study.
So just a little bit about me. I am South African, and but I came to the United States to do my education, so my PhD and my postdoc, and now I'm actually stuck here, and being a faculty member here at the University of Memphis. But so my background is actually not in nutrition. My education, my formal education, is not in nutrition. My undergraduate was in biochemistry, so really to understand the biochemical reactions that happens within this amazing body that we have. And then I switched over for my PhD to molecular pharmacology because I was really interested in treatments. And then I made another big switch when I did my postdoctoral fellowship into bone marrow transplantation. And you might say, oh my goodness, I have no idea why you would do that. But again, I was still very interested in cellular therapy, which is really what bone marrow transplantation is. And so, and doing that, you really have to know immunology. And so this is where my life hit the immunology field. And I really fell in love with this field. And then realizing that, it's not just cellular therapy such as bone marrow transplantation, but it is really these cells and their environment that they survive in that dictate many of our physiological status. So basically what happens to these cells will drive what type of chronic diseases we will develop. And so luckily, not being in the nutrition field, I then did get a position, faculty position in the nutrition science program, which allowed me to use all these very kind of hardcore science techniques and background that I have in a field that typically not always had the science, it's only, but I would say the last 10 to 15 years, we've really kind of moved the hardcore sciences into the nutrition field. Mm-hmm. And now are understanding, the little bits and pieces that, of the physiology and how they interact with each other and how they interact with the environment, being the food that we eat, and how that kind of dictates your health status.
Right. And I love that you made that point, because I always talk to people, my clients, whoever I talk to, that food speaks to your cells, right? Food is information for our cells, and the kind of food, like you said, that we put into it is so important. And I think that just gets lost in the translation of the whole, not for us. We get that, and those of us in the food is medicine arena get that. But I think the general population really gets lost in the fact that food really should be or the right kind of food. It gives our cells the right kind of information to function properly. And if we're not putting in whole foods that are healthy, that are going to be nutritionally supportive, our cells suffer as a result, and therefore our bodies suffer as a result.
One of the very first questions I ask my students at the beginning of almost every semester is, why do we eat?
Right.
Why do we eat? the only reason we eat is to get the energy and the, how can I put it, like the bits and pieces of machinery that you use to actually make your metabolism going. That is why you eat, like vitamins, you know, they're like the wheels and the gaskets and the things that go onto the car. So that is why we eat. There's no other reason we eat. That hamburger and French fries do not have the things that you need for that metabolic program to be, you know, to run.
Yes. Right. We need more of that, louder.
No, okay. Well, so I'm very, you know.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying the global, right? We need to get that kind of information out there loud so people actually listen, right?
That's true.
So I love it. So thank you. And so obviously you, like me, you know, we're both passionate about the work we do. And I was just saying how I'm just fascinated by the whole immune system. It's just amazing to me. So let's take, you know, a dive in and get and really discuss why this topic has become so confusing. And I think, you know, people hear these terms and they're not really sure how to understand them or what to do with them. So can you explain, because now we keep hearing gut microbiome. Can you explain what is the gut microbiome?
Yes, I can explain what the gut microbiome is. So the gut microbiome, so, you know, as human beings, we are covered in bacteria, or microorganisms, I should say, not just bacteria. It's bacteria and fungi and viruses. And we live in homeostasis, basically, with all these microorganisms that surrounds us and also is inside. And of course, our intestinal lumen, the gut, right? The inside of our gut is really still the external environment. Right. So I think people have to get that idea that the gut, from the beginning of my mouth to where everything ends on the other side, is really the external environment. So that is also covered by bacteria. And we have this symbiotic relationship with them that have evolved over, you know, eons. And so the gut bacteria is a very specific kind of group of bacteria. So, and so we are populated all the way from your mouth to the other side. The most densely packed area, the most densely populated area, of course, is your large intestine. Okay, so we do have bacteria also all the way through your small intestine, but the large intestine is really where you have the largest, the most populations of the gut bacteria. And so, I mean, it is just like any other ecological site. If there is food for the bacteria there, the bacteria will thrive. And the type of food that you put into that ecological site will dictate what type of bacteria will thrive there. And so if you feed it, you know, French fries, you will drive the growth of bacteria that typically not normally grew in that ecological site. And so your physiology, and this also means your immune system, which interacts with that bacteria, you know, now has a different group of bacteria that they really don't know if they're friend or foe. But just to get back to the bacteria themselves, so, you know, we have about, they use this term that there's 10-fold more cells in the microbiome, meaning the biota, the gut biota that lives in the gut, than you have in your body. So that means that genetic information that you have in your gut is much more than I carry around in my cells.
Right.
And so these bacteria have all kinds of capabilities that we do not necessarily have. For instance, they can break down fiber. We do not have the enzymes that can break down fiber, or specific types of fiber. So, yeah, and so this is basically it. It's a group of bacteria. We have a symbiotic relationship with most of them. They have to be, their numbers have to be, how do I say? They have to be in the right ratio. The different populations have to be in the right ratio. And so we get to this idea of a diverse gut microbiome. You'll hear this all the time, that a diverse gut microbiome is associated with health. The moment you have gut issues, depression, obesity, type 2 diabetes, is when the ratios between the bacteria actually is kind of out of whack. And you have a growth of bacteria that, you know, again, that's not necessarily your health promoting type of bacteria that should be in that ecological site. And I just want to kind of mention this too. This is because this is one of the fascinating areas for me. That so bacteria, they, for instance, they will break down the fiber, right? You break down the fiber, and then they generate metabolites, right? So they actually have the input, and then they have an output. And those metabolites, we call them short chain fatty acids. Those metabolites are things that we use. Some of them we actually use for energy. Many of them are signaling molecules. They can actually signal to your immune system to make your immune system tolerant to that type of bacteria. So to say, okay, well, this is a good guy. It is giving me, increased energy or other types of health beneficial molecules. So do not, get inflamed. Do not attack whenever this type of bacteria is there. So it's this constant crosstalk between the bacteria and the immune system.
Right. So they're having a whole other conversation that we don't even know about. Right?
No, absolutely. I mean, there is so much stuff going on.
Right. Exactly. Like who's where. So you mentioned something that was interesting that I think, people really want to hear more about is that connection between the bacteria and some of these chronic diseases. And I think obviously things like type 2 diabetes and obesity, and I definitely want to touch on that. But I think one thing, especially in my practice, that we hear, that I talk about over and over is I would like to get a better understanding of my clients' microbiome when we do some testing and so forth for weight loss purposes, right? Because we know, and as you mentioned, so I would like you to elaborate a little bit, but that obesity is associated to an imbalanced microbiome. So can you elaborate on that? I mean, what is that conversation that the microbiome is having or not having that leads to, contributes to, or prevents people from weight loss?
So everybody wants the magic pill, right? Yeah. And so at the end of the day, I want to say, I'm going to give you this probiotic, and we're going to change your gut microbiome, and suddenly you're going to be skinny. So the thing that makes that very difficult to do is the fact that all of us have your microbiome is almost like a fingerprint, right? My microbiome, even though I'm a healthy person, might not look like the microbiome of the person that's sitting right next to me, which is also a very healthy person. And so we all have probably about 160 different types of bacteria that live in your gut, but the 160 is not necessarily the same from one person to the next person. And so it's not easy to say my microbiome should be this for me to be skinny. But again, it is more of the balance between the different types of bacteria that, that is important for your health, and so, it actually gets to the fact that we, this is why it's difficult to just say, everybody do this and you'll all have the same outcome. Right. Because you have a different microbiome, and it interacts with the immune system that have a different genetic background that gives you a different, outcome. And in addition to that, obesity, the thing that also, we have this addition, it's not just driven by the microbiome, the obesity itself, for instance, right? Right. So obesity, the inflammation that's coming from your adipose tissue, which is almost completely independent from the microbiome, but the two things collide and then makes everything much worse, and then leads to, type 2 diabetes or all these other diseases. So, so I don't want to just hand wave and say that, there's nothing to do, but it really is, if you did not take a whole bunch of antibiotics, right, and wiped out certain species, if you can regrow by using, mostly it's complex carbohydrates, many of these microbiota, and get them back into, again, in their right ratios, the metabolites that they will make will be less inflammatory. Right. And that inflammation is what's driving a lot of the physiological changes that leads to type 2 diabetes, which makes your whole metabolism just not work. It's like gears. I always think of metabolism like gears. Mm-hmm. And I'm sticking like this pencil in this gear, and everything just kind of shuts down. And so if you get it out, the metabolism can work again. I can optimally burn fat, and I can, use the energy that I have. But if you have all these inflammatory molecules floating around, it kind of it's that pencil in the gear, and it blocks everything else from functioning. Right. And I love that description and that explanation, because I think people need to realize that
that weight and inflammation and all these other things are really all connected to our overall health. And it isn't, oh, just give me the magic pill. Or if I just, I often hear, well, if I just diet and exercise, yeah, why am I not thin? And have I not lost weight? Why am I gaining weight? Whatever. And I always explain to my clients, it is much more complex than just that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now the more we dig and the more we learn, and the more we obviously are realizing that it's even more complex than we ever thought. So thank you for that was I like that explanation a lot. And I think, if people can use that visual, like, yeah, maybe my gears aren't as well lubricated or supported, then but that's what nutrition does, and that's what food does. And we'll get a little bit more into that, because I talk about all of the root vegetables, the ones that generate butyric acid, right? That help those short fatty acids.
Yeah.
And I think it's a problem because people tend to say, well, I don't want to eat, we just completely cut out food groups because we want to lose weight. And we realize we've just cut out one of the most beneficial food groups that we could actually consume.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I mean, and it really is, and again, you have to pay attention to yourself.
Yes.
And then kind of see the things that you're doing, the things that doesn't work. I mean, because for some people, something might work, and then for the next guy, it might not.
Exactly.
And but, to get back to this idea of gears, I also do some kind of intermittent fasting work. And some of that we've connected to the microbiome. So, and again, the idea of having a start, right, which is where your circadian rhythm, the biological clock, you kind of switch it on and you have all these gears running. And so when you eat at wrong times and the wrong things, all of this, just gets really uncoupled.
Right.
And it just doesn't make for an easy flow through this machine, so so it is. So just to say that it is a very complex machine, and all the things that we do, and it takes a time. I think it takes time for things to go wrong, and then it takes a long time for things to get fixed.
Right. And we live in a society, in a world, I think we want that quick fix. But go back for 1 second when you said the circadian rhythm about turning things on, and then because I talk a lot about sleep and how important sleep is, and maintaining that circadian rhythm. So, and then you mentioned something else, and now I was trying to remember, but it'll come back to me. But if you could touch on the circadian rhythm, because I think, again, people don't realize how important sleep is and why we need talk about, like, why do you eat? Why do we need to sleep?
Yeah.
If you could touch on that and how that affects immunity and the gut microbiome, that'd be great.
Yeah. So, so the circadian rhythm for most, for those of people that do not necessarily work on this every single day, it's the 24-hour cycle that not just us, all organisms on this planet actually go through. Bacteria have a 24-hour cycle. And in this cycle, we actually have a catabolic phase, meaning we break things down, and then we have an anabolic phase where we build things up. And again, these are all, the part of your metabolic machine that's driving that. And so what we're seeing with people that do, for instance, shift work. Mm-hmm. So people that do shift work, they sleep during the day and then they go out go work at night, and which also means that they eat at night. People that do shift work have increased risk of diabetes and obesity, cardiovascular disease, all these diseases that we typically associate with food, with not being in a not eating the right food, basically.
Right. Right.
And so the circadian rhythm, how the circadian rhythm basically works, we have a specific area in the brain that gets activated in the morning when I stand up and I see light for the first time. That activates this, whole metabolic pathway in my brain. And that kind of starts sending signals to the rest of, my organs, my liver, my pancreas, to start making digestive enzymes, to make all the other enzymes, detoxifying enzymes. And then at that same time, so I'm kind of primed to eat. Right? I've just made these enzymes to eat. And so then I eat and I break the things down, my enzymes break it up, I absorb it, and I build it, I use it, I make energy, I can make proteins from that, I can use it for energy. And then, as we go on during the day, So yeah, and so you do that in the beginning of the day, and so the cycle, the genes that get expressed kind of go up, and then towards the afternoon, the night, they go down, and then you have a different set of genes that basically activated, and these are to kind of look for things that's wrong in your cell. Mm-hmm. So these are the time when you are at night and you're sleeping. Those are the things that's kind of fixing. We go through something called autophagy because we're not eating at that point in time. And it's cleaning out the cells from proteins that's misfolded or not correct. And so you have to have this time where the cells work and do all the things that they're doing, and then get to a time where the cells is kind of, fixing themselves and getting ready for the next day. And so if you mess this up by eating in the wrong time, for instance, this completely throws off this whole cycle that's supposed to happen.
Right.
And so, I mean, the same with the microbiome. So now that you eat, I make the metabolites, or the microbiome generates this metabolite, but it's generated at the wrong time. I absorb it, I get it in. It's not there when, everything else is supposed to be using it. So, and just the whole, and so you can basically reprogram your metabolism by just eating at the same time in the mornings, and then stopping to eat, and then having a time of fasting when you're sleeping, basically, and then starting over. You're reprogramming your metabolism to follow that specific cycle, and so your microbiome basically follows the same cycle because it lives on the food that you eat.
Right.
But again, so it's really important. I mean, so there's many studies that show that even if you eat a high-fat diet, you can do this intermittent fasting, and it improves health. And it's true that you see some health improvements, but I also want to make the point that you cannot just do that with an unhealthy diet. You still have to have the healthy diet.
Exactly.
It is like people that then choose to follow an Atkins type diet, right? That is not good for the microbiota. The microbiota you will increase the type of microbiota that will give you colon cancer. That's not the type of microbiota that you want there. And so it's important. The sleep and circadian rhythm, absolutely important. The type of food that you also eat is just as important.
Right. I love that. I'm going to record this and play this over for every single one of my clients. And so let's talk, because I know the next question is going to be, for anybody watching, is going to be, okay, well, let's talk a little bit about, so we're going to digress just a little bit, but the whole intermittent fasting piece, because again, so fascinating. And I get this all day long from people as well, right? And you see some people, and we're all individuals, but some people are doing a fast and they're not seeing results, and some are, and maybe they're just not realizing the results that they want. And of course, that's individual as well. But can you speak to the intermittent fasting in terms of, is there a preferential window, right? We hear 12, 14, 16 hours. What, in your opinion and research, is the best way to do that, and the best timing through the day, right? People want to make up that they're, whatever times that they're doing it. Yeah. Is really a best time? So I'll put that in your court there.
So I will tell you, so we've done animal studies with these because it's just so much easier to control timing and food, in an animal study. And so, the studies that we did was not to look at day versus night eating, but actually but early day versus late day eating. So if I eat all my main meals earlier in the day, from breakfast to maybe just past lunch, or then lunch shift to kind of past dinner, which one of those are more beneficial? So for weight gain, I would say, or weight loss, and also metabolic improvement, they're kind of similar. The one thing that we saw was that if you eat later at night, your fasting insulin the next morning is much higher than the group that ate earlier in the day. Huh. So, and to me, it's like you want to get your fasting, you want to get your insulin levels lower. You don't want these high insulin levels. And so I personally think earlier fast, like from breakfast to mid-afternoon, is, and I've tried this all kinds of various ways. This is the easiest way, but I will also say this, that I think as just a person, a mom that has to cook a dinner at night for most of the time, not eating dinner with your family is really hard.
Yeah.
And so even though I think the breakfast to 4 o'clock in the afternoon is probably the best whenever you can do it, if you feel like you need to have dinner with your kids, you need to figure out your lifestyle, how you can do it. Then, okay, just keep breakfast and only eat from 12 o'clock, and so do that. I do think people have to find the best way to make it possible and make it a lifestyle change. Because if it's just a thing that you're doing for a month, it's a waste of time. Don't even try.
Right.
You'll be fine for a week, and then, okay, we're going back to just what it was. So it has to be such that it's a lifestyle change. It has to become part of what you're doing for the rest of your life. So you have to figure out what it is. But I would say for a physiological thing that we saw that's different is that the insulin levels being higher, which would maybe still be a risk for insulin resistance later on. The later at night is it's better to eat earlier in the day.
Right, and we always talk about that as well. So time-wise, 12 hours, 14 hours, does that matter to you then so much? Or is it more, it's an 8-hour window of eating, a 6-hour window of eating? Like what, how do you, I'm to this, I'm just sort of, I know people are gonna ask.
Yeah. To me, I think the 8-hour window of eating is the most beneficial for most people. So if you have 8 hours where you can eat and then 16 hours where you don't, that's a doable, beneficial time frame. And that gives your body enough time to kind of reboot during those 16 hours. Yeah.
Great. That's great information. And again, the rationale behind it to me is always so fascinating. So let's jump right in now to what we're seeing with the gut and COVID and how your gut health, right, and immunity impacts your ability to fight the disease. So I'm sure intermittent fasting probably plays a role in that, but in terms of, let's speak about something else that you're seeing, or are you seeing between the gut health and COVID? So,
having leaky gut, for instance, will increase your inflammatory status, period, because you now have bacterial components that might get into the blood, and that is where your inflammatory kind of molecules will be generated. And so having leaky gut, or any kind of gut disease where you have inflammation going on, might increase, and I'm not saying it always will do this, but it alters the immune status of how well it will fight other infections. If you have to think that your immune system is now constantly engaged in the gut, taking care of something, and now I have this viral infection, that is the second source of where I have to use energy, right? And so gut health absolutely will affect, gut health affects really everything, but gut health will also affect your immune system and how it will fight other infections. I want to mention something, and this is something that I don't have the answer to yet. We're actually just starting to look at that, and it's something that I just absolutely find fascinating. And it goes back to, so I read this paper a couple of months ago, right when all the COVID stuff started, and they were talking about these people that have more severe COVID disease having a higher expression, and I'm sorry if I'm becoming very technical, but I hope I can explain it, having a higher expression of this molecule called PD-1, it stands for programmed death 1, on your T cells. Okay, so whenever you see PD-1, it means that those T cells are exhausted, or they're less efficient at fighting a virus. Okay, and so what they saw, and so that makes sense that people that might have COVID infections, if they had a higher level of this PD-1, they're not clearing the virus quickly, and so they might have more disease. And so, interestingly, not very long ago, maybe the last 2 years, it's also been shown that people that's overweight and obese have higher levels of PD-1 on their T cells, independent of any viral infection.
Okay.
And so this to me is really interesting, because that means that they already have an exhausted T cell repertoire before they ever got the virus. And the the comorbidities for COVID right now is, you know, type 2 diabetes, you know, obesity. So it's all these things. So, you know, keep a lookout for that, because I do think that maybe the changes that's induced by our diet and changes in physiology that then alter the immune system will affect how they respond to the viral infections.
Right. And you know, and that's a great point, because it really also reinforces the fact that food is so important.
Yeah.
Real food is so important, because it really does just set us up for, like, that is our operating system, and our body knows what to do with it. And when we're not feeding it the right fuel, the body becomes compromised everywhere.
Yeah.
And that is such a huge point. And again, you know, yes, you get into the minutia of what this looks like, but it is so important that people understand that this is why we're talking about that, and this is why it's so important that we, you know, we may sound like a broken record, but I think people hear it and then they go out and do what they want. You know, they just go out and continue to do the things that keep them unhealthy, and or it becomes very dismissive. Oh, I know I shouldn't be having so much sugar. Oh, but it tastes good, right?
Yeah.
And then we don't realize the far-reaching effect that it has on our entire system and the immune system. And oh my God, I swear I could sit here and probably ask you questions for hours, because I just it's so fascinating. But you know, so we touched a little bit on the, you know, the chronic inflammation and the disease part of that, I guess. So
so let me just mention something, and I'm sorry that I'm interrupting, because
no, right ahead, feel free.
I think the other thing that I think I would like people to understand also is, you know, and this is kind of getting kind of back to the gut, is we don't think about the fact that, but the inside of the gut, there's actually a lining of what we call mucus. You know, we all know what mucus is.
Right.
And actually that mucus is incredibly important, right? And that keeps all the bacteria at a specific location away from the cells, and so that the right things interact with the cells. And so the food that we eat, especially things that dissolve, and this is in many of the foods that we eat, it dissolves that mucus lining. And when that's gone, all the bacteria sits right on top of the cells, you know, and good, bad, whatever it is, can now make havoc, right? So they can interact. You can kind of suddenly have, you know, epithelial cells that's supposed to be this tight to each other, break them apart, and then things can get through, right? So this is, you know, again, so it's stuff that's in ice cream, right? Stuff that's in powdered milk. It dissolves the lining, not really the lining, but the mucus. And it just allows for that bacteria to get to the gut and generate this inflammatory kind of milieu that then, you know, affects everything. You cause depression, for instance, you know, so.
Right. So can you talk about the foods that do that? What are the foods that like, or what are the compounds that break down that layer?
Yeah, so, I should have looked this up before I came in. But
well, if you happen to know off the top, otherwise we can make it for another conversation, right?
Yeah, but it's emulsifiers. And so it's everything where you have things that have to be emulsified with lots of fat, like ice cream and powdered milk and things like that, where you have emulsifiers. So what is emulsifiers? It dissolves the little fat and makes it into little droplets. And so it does the same thing with the mucus lining.
So would that be something like some of these gums that we're now seeing, the xanthan gum and some
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is.
And think about it. We have all these people consuming and you know, like these milk alternatives that have all of these things in them and right. So you can speak to that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's these gums things. That's exactly what it is. It's emulsifiers, and so that's what it does to your gut. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah, you know, so we may have some of these things that in theory they're, you know, plant-based milks that everybody's plant-based, but the problem is it's not real food. It's loaded with these emulsifiers. Because if you've ever made almond milk, we all know how it separates.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny to me. You know, I was thinking the other day, I bought this bag of, just because I was curious, this bag of banana chips, and it tasted like chips. It had salt and all these things on it. And I was just thinking, I was like, wow, you know, we took this perfect little banana that came in a peel. It was fine. You could leave it on the table for a week. And I made this thing that has like nothing. It tastes nothing like a banana. What on earth?
Right. Right. I mean, and then we call that healthy.
Yeah, and exactly. It was in the health section of the store, you know. Yeah.
Right. So again, slightly off topic. This was definitely not on my list, but now I'm curious. we talk about things that, and especially I talk about it with my clients, staying away from processed gluten because we know the gluten can affect the tight junctions in the gut and so forth, right? And dairy. So, gluten's an easy one to kind of to rationalize. I think people have a harder time with dairy or even processed dairy. And, we hear confusion about that. Do you have any opinion one way or the other on dairy? I always say that fermented dairy products are certainly much more healthy because of the natural probiotics. But do you have any opinion? I'm certainly not holding you to it, but I was just curious for my own, kind of research.
So my opinion about dairy is we have evolved this enzyme that allows us to get energy from this very nutritious source, right, from milk. And so obviously along our history, this was very beneficial to people. So I don't think outright dairy is just bad for people.
Right.
So there's obviously people that's, we say not, so what's the word now? It's lactase persistent or lactose intolerant. They have the different words now. That obviously can't use it, so you can't drink it. It's your genetic makeup, you cannot allow. And so if I have a lack of calories, milk would be fine. If this is healthy milk that's not filled with antibiotics and all kinds of other things. Is it good for the planet? I think lots of dairy cows is not good for the planet, so it is good to try alternative things. So I'm all for trying alternative things to kind of keep everything in balance. But I think just from a physiological point of view, unless your genetic makeup has something that it cannot handle, the milk proteins or what, I can handle milk just fine. I'm from Northern Europe. I have Northern European genes. So we have obviously evolved to use it. And so I'm not a big milk drinker, but if I need 100 calories, I will drink a glass of milk, right? So.
Right. Got it. That's perfect. So one other thing, and then I know, I'm probably going longer than we should, but like I said, this is fascinating. So one other area that I think is also pretty common, and, we're seeing a lot of it, is the whole food allergy, food sensitivity conversation. Right? People are coming to, I think I have this allergy, right? And there's a million tests out there. We're all doing these IgG tests, IgE tests, CD, the complement proteins and so forth. And I don't know if this is the work that you do or don't do, but I figured I'd throw it out there since we're talking about all this, gut food kind of connection. Do you have any information on that? Can you speak to the food allergy piece of it, or even any of the testing that is being done in that area? How accurate?
This is not the food allergy is not but I will tell you that my reading and my understanding from this, and my personal opinion is the fact. So if I have a microbiota and also a mucus lining that is not proper, again, you get food pieces, right? You're not digesting the food properly, and now suddenly you have food pieces that's in contact with cells where it shouldn't have been.
Right. And
that drives absolutely it drives the allergies. I would also say I think there's a genetic component. I've seen people become, allergic without really changing anything else. So I do think there are a genetic component to this, which of course it drives your immune system has a specific, it drives the immune system in a specific direction.
Right, absolutely. And I do a lot of the genomic testing now. So doing the nutritional genomics, and we are seeing, people with the DAO, that diamine oxidase, SNP, and some of the other things. The FOOT2 gene that we know has a relationship to B12, but it also has a relationship to what's going on in the gut microbiome. So, it's nice that we can now look at that from the genomic perspective and at least help elucidate for some of those people that maybe didn't know, this is why I need to do this or how, and put them on a better trajectory for prevention based on their individual genomics.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the future, right? We will look at these things and then tell you this is, these are the things that you are predisposed to. So this is the future. I mean, this is, again, I think it's such an exciting time to be in the nutrition field. I'm just imagining students that's just starting, right now, in 20 years from now, what are they going to do and what are they going to know?
Yeah, right. Hopefully amazing things. So okay, my last question, because you've been so generous with your time, but so really to tie it all up, to tie it up, what do you recommend to people when it comes to nutrition and immune support and gut health? Like, is there sort of, again, that 30,000, foot view of what generally is your recommendation?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I would recommend. First of all, you have to be in sync with your circadian rhythm. So really important to eat certain times and then not eat certain times. Give your body a time to kind of, rest and recover. It is really important to get enough fiber. You have to get enough fiber. We have depleted our diets from fiber, and fiber is really what, it is what the microbiota, what they use, and the metabolites of that, we have, opted that to use that for all kinds of things. And so fiber, please eat a lot of fiber. I also will say, pay attention to your fat. Make sure that you get a good ratio of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And saturated fat is important, but you don't want too much of that. So, and at the end, and so for gut health, I would also say that, there's certain things that you have to make sure that you have it in your diet. I'm a big believer in vitamin C, zinc. You don't necessarily need to get it through a supplement, but these things, you have to make sure that they are in good quantities. Vitamin D, good quantities in your diet. In vitamin D, if you don't get it in your diet, please make sure that you take a supplement, because that does affect your immune system. So that is really my overall, don't eat all the time. give your body some time to rest. Feed the bacteria the right stuff so they can keep you healthy. And, kind of be good to yourself.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. What great advice. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really have enjoyed it. I'm excited. I'm already thinking about what the next one's going to be with you and I, but it was really very generous of you to spend some time with us, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure our viewers will as well.
Well, thanks, Meryl. It was great. I love to talk about these things, and I would absolutely love to talk to you more about it. And, I hope people find value in what we've spoken about, and
I study this and I do this all day long, and I've even found value. So I'm sure you have really helped a lot of people out there. So again,
that's great. So, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate that.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of The Rebel Nutritionist. If you want more support and tips to help you go further with your own personal health journey, then become a Brandwine Rebel Insider. When you join my list, you'll get access to freebies such as meal planners, workshops, recipes, and so much more. Head over to brandwine.com/rebel and sign up there. I'll see you next week for another great episode. Bye for now.